Today's video has been sponsored by BenQ. Final Fantasy villains have ranged over the years from nihilistic pretty boys to, this thing. What even is this thing? From trying to become God to trying to get revenge, this is my list of Final Fantasy's goodest bat doers. Note that this list is not a ranking of each game's quality or overall storytelling. It's simply a ranking of their villains and how compelling those villains are, and not my overall feelings on the games they come from. It means that the character themselves makes for a standout, compelling antagonist, something you can have even when the rest of the story isn't quite up to pace. These, in my personal assessment, are the best Final Fantasy villains. But first, a word from our sponsor BenQ and their Mobius EX3210R monitor. This beautiful 1000R curved screen comes with a 165Hz refresh rate, 1 millisecond MPRT, and FreeSync Premium, so get ready for an ultra smooth experience while playing your favorite games like Final Fantasy XIV. It features HDRI auto-adjusted settings to show clear, realistic details and vivid HDR content. Not to mention a light tuner and black equalizer brings details to dark scenes in games and movies. On most monitors, you certainly won't get a quality built-in speaker, but with the Mobius's built-in 2.1 channel speakers powered by Trevolo, you'll be blown away by the incredible audio immersion. And with there being a $50 off coupon from now till November 30th, you don't want to wait, so be sure to check the link in the description below. Number 5. Caius Ballad, Final Fantasy XIII-2. Caius Ballad might be the best purple man in Final Fantasy. After all, the only villain in the original 13 was the game's story and character writing, but Final Fantasy XIII-2 was the polar opposite. Caius Ballad has strong motivations, a willingness to destroy all of history to protect Yule, a woman he's seen die countless times to fulfill her duty as oracle given to her by the goddess Etro. But he also shows up and says things like, if you change the future, you'll change the past, which might actually be the dumbest take on time travel I've ever heard. He's equal parts terrifyingly strong and terrifyingly handsome, possessing the heart of chaos, effectively making him immortal, and also allowing him to incarnate summon, turning into Bahamut. Caius makes this list not just because of his incredible voice acting, his cool non-compensating anime sword, and the fact that he is purple. No, instead Caius makes this list because of how well defined his motivations are, and how human those motivations feel. Being forced to watch someone beloved to him die repeated deaths, all while dealing with the curse of immortality, leaving him with no escape. And much like every other villain on this list, Caius simply has an elevated presence that forces every scene with him to be incredibly captivating. Number 4. Kefka Palazzo, Final Fantasy VI. Hey look, it's the guy we all look like when there's no Final Fantasy XVI trailer. While Kefka isn't normally the type of villain that I enjoy in a story, he might just be my favorite poster of all time. Kefka has been banned so many times, but you can be sure he's got another alt ready to post only the most appropriate content. Unlike many of the other villains on this list, there is no sympathetic story or redeeming qualities to this guy. He is literally just an asshole, but it's awesome because it's kind of his thing. Like, that's just what he does. Poison the water supply of Doma? Why not? Kefka being the first of the experimental Magitech Knights, he was given the ability to use magic. This backfires, however, as the yet-to-be-perfected process coincidentally gives him an insatiable bloodlust. Whoops. Kefka's pure evil nature and raw power makes him completely terrifying every time he's on screen, creating a thrilling sense of suspense. It's no wonder he's one of the most iconic villains in the Final Fantasy series. Well, I mean, other than the murder thing. Number 3. Arden, Lucis, Caelum, Final Fantasy XV. Forget my channel's namesake for a second while I tell you the honest truth. Final Fantasy XV was not a well-written video game, like, at all. It did, however, have super endearing characters. Above all of them, the one shining gem of the game's story was Arden and his incredibly fascinating backstory. You know, the one you had to play Arden's DLC, watch his stand standalone anime and play episode Ignis in order to fully understand. And honestly, this is what holds Arden back from the top spot. That being said, once all the pieces are put together, it's a pretty compelling story. The king of Lucis to be was gaslit like none other, simply for wanting to save people infected with the Star Scourge, rather than literally killing them, like his brother who's revered as a hero. Being betrayed by toxic brother Somnus, being tortured and imprisoned for 1,000 years, kept as the family's dark secret, Arden has absolutely every reason to seek revenge. Indeed, maybe the kingdom of Lucis burning to the ground for its lies wasn't such a bad thing. Number 2, Sephiroth, Final Fantasy VII Original. While he may not be number 1 on the list, he is without question the most iconic villain in the Final Fantasy series. A man once lauded as a hero sees himself live long enough to become a villain, and a hair model. Sephiroth is essentially a horror movie style villain, said to be inspired by Jaws. You don't see much of him, but when he does emerge from the water, oh my god, it's Sephiroth. This withholding of Sephiroth builds up both intrigue and unease in the player, making him simultaneously mysterious and intimidating. But Sephiroth is more than just his bark. Can I spoil the most important death of the original Final Fantasy VII? Does anyone watching this channel not know? He permanently kills Aerith Gainsborough. I mean, technically. It's him, it's actually Jenova, but it's his will acting in Jenova to do the thing. In either case, he killed her. Sephiroth takes someone away from you, and it is personal. Sephiroth, at least in the original Final Fantasy VII, was used sparingly to build anticipation for the final showdown, creating an unforgettable sense of rivalry. Number 1, Emet-Selch, Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. Yeah, you already knew what the was going on when you clicked on my video. Imagine Arden, but written by someone who knew what they were doing, and that's Emet-Selch. While Final Fantasy has a lot of incredibly interesting villains, there is no villain that is more tightly written and delivered than Emet-Selch. Not seeking to become God, not seeking revenge, but rather seeking the rejoining of worlds, that he might be reunited with all the loved ones that he lost. Restore the world, his world. And none of these motivations are a spoiler, by the way. He quite literally tells you these are his motivations from the moment that you meet him. Emet-Selch never once lies to you about his goals or his intentions, instead finding ways to align his objectives with yours. Beneath the mask of sowing the seeds of chaos is a man trapped in grieving at the loss of everything he held dear. And to add insult to injury, as time went on, no one remembered his people or his world. All these things to become lost history, and yet driven to madness, eternal grief, to the edge, one might say. You're forced to recognize that part of Emet-Selch is also within you, that in his immortal shoes, that so many of us would really not do that different. All of this and more is what makes Emet-Selch the most compelling Final Fantasy villain. But these are just the best Final Fantasy villains in my opinion. And now I want to hear yours. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and let me know your top 5 in the comments below. And if you enjoy videos like these, consider becoming a patron like Nicholas Berry to help keep the channel going and growing. Link in the description below.